Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode 131 of How to Get Hired. We've done a lot of these. And just a welcome to everybody. This is where we talk about how to get hired, as the name implies. And this is a interactive Q&A. So if you have been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in the chat box. You should see some kind of chat box depending on whatever device you're watching this on. And get in there. Let me know what you're wondering, what you're confused about. And I will do my best to help you out. That's the whole point of this. The title of today's episode is What Are Your Salary Expectations? Best answer. So we're going to start off talking about that. And a special shout out, as always, goes out to my YouTube channel members and my Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course to you, my viewers. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. We are here to talk about careers. We're here to talk about job search. So anything related to that is a good question if you are wondering. Now, let's kick things off by talking about the salary question, everybody's favorite thing. This is something that I've done some public opinion polls on my channel, and by far, for some reason, people seem to have the most anxiety over this question, which is a little bit weird because it's actually not that hard of a question to answer. Okay, so like that's the thing. I think people fear it, but it really isn't that big of a deal. Now, I'm just going to start off and I'm just going to give you the answer that I recommend for most people in a job interview, especially if you're talking to a recruiter. Okay, they're going to want to answer for you to answer this question. And if you're in an interview, okay, it's a little bit different than if this question is asked on a job application form or a website, like a web form. Okay. Usually when you see this question asked on a web form, they really rig it so there's only one thing that you can do, and that is supply a number. Okay? You can't give a range. You can't write text. You can't give an explanation. You can't skip the question, right? So they really jury rig it so the only thing you can do is give a number. What you would do then is you would simply give the lowest number you would possibly accept if all the things that they haven't told you about the job, which are many at this point, turn out to be best case scenario. Okay. So for example, you're applying for a job. They haven't told you about the benefits, right? Is there a benefit package of any kind? Oh, they haven't mentioned that? Okay. Well, you don't know that. Let's assume it's really good. They give you a full pension, full dental coverage, full eye care, like, a company car, whatever. Like just imagine it's best case scenario. Now fill in what's the lowest amount of money you take this job for. Okay. How much vacation do you get? Oh, they didn't mention that. It could be 1 week. It could be 6 weeks. You have no idea. Okay, let's assume it's 6 weeks. Fill in the number of the lowest amount that you would possibly accept to take the job. Okay, that's how you do it when this question is asked on a web form. Okay, because it's totally disingenuous. They're not telling you anything important about the job, but then they demand that you give a number. So it's really silly. It's very artificial. So two can play that game. What they do on a web form is they simply, the reason they ask the question before you could even submit your job application is because if the number that you enter is not to their liking, it's below a certain hurdle amount, or above a certain hurdle amount. Usually they place an upper limit and a lower limit. The computer system will not even send your application to the recruiter. It'll just sort of terminate it right there, right? That's the reason they ask some questions right up front, because if you answer unfavorably to any one of them, it just ends your application right there. It doesn't even get seen by a human. Okay, so that's why they ask that. So that's how you handle that question on an application form. But now we are in an interview, okay? And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. When we talk about the question, what are your salary expectations? Now the assumption is that you're in an interview and you're speaking with a person and you can give something other than a simple number. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. Joshua is here. Shout out to Joshua. Joshua says, Bill, great subject. Looking forward to learning. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Joshua. I hope you don't let you down. Okay. So we're in a job interview. Why do they ask this question? Okay. Here is the deal. The reason they're asking this question is not to have a fruitful discussion with you about what amount of money you would need and how they can accommodate you and all this kind of stuff. That's not what it's about. They're asking the question simply to eliminate you, okay? The only time that they would have a discussion about salary where they try and kick it around and see what can be mutually beneficial, that only happens at the offer stage later on when they've given you a job offer. They say, we pick you, right? Now they're more serious about talking about money, okay? But if you're at any point before that in the process, okay, so for example, your first job interview with them, okay, they haven't decided to offer you the job yet. They're still talking to several candidates, right? You're one of them. At that point, if they bring up the salary question, okay, they say, what are your salary expectations? It's not to try and accommodate you, it's to try and eliminate you, okay? And the idea being is that if you ask for too much money, the idea is they will eliminate you from the running. Okay, that's how these things work. Now, some people don't understand this. I've sort of commented on this many times before, and a lot of younger people or people that are new to job interviews, they don't understand that. It's like, the thing is, they're talking to several candidates. They could hire any one of them. And the thing is, it's like you when you go to the store, right? Someone says, okay, can you go to the store for me? I need you to buy some Band-Aids, like something like that, some random thing that you're not an expert in. Okay, so you go to the store, you go down to the Band-Aid aisle, and there are 10 options, 10 different types of Band-Aids, and they're all different brands, and they're all different prices, right? So you got to decide on one. So what's the first thing you do? Well, you look at the prices. Okay, now this box of Band-Aids is $1. That box of Band-Aids is $10. You got 10 different brands to choose from. You're probably going to eliminate the most expensive options just outright. You're not going to take a closer look at them. You're not going to see like, oh, is this worth the price? No, you're just going to eliminate it outright because you got a lot of choices and you got to start narrowing this down. So that's what recruiters and hiring managers do when they have a lot of candidates, right? You have 6 candidates that you might be interviewing. What's the first thing you do? You ask them, what are your salary expectations? And one person says, I need $250,000 to do this job, and you say, okay, excellent. Thank you for telling me that. And another person says, well, I'm going to need $125,000 to do this job, right? Then the third person says, well, I'll do it for minimum wage. And then the fourth person says, well, I'll need about $40,000. That's kind of my cutoff. So you've got many people to choose from. You're probably going to eliminate the first one or two, like, most expensive people right off the bat. Okay. Someone wants $250,000. Okay. Sorry, we're not willing to pay that. Goodbye. Right. They're not going to look at that person to see if they were worth it or not. They're just going to eliminate them. And that's why they're asking this question. Okay. Now, the problem is, the elephant in the room is that if you give a really low number and say minimum wage, the problem is that later on, if they do end up offering you the job, it's hard to then sort of turn around and say, well, I actually need more than minimum wage, right? Because they're going to think, well, wait a minute, you told us minimum wage before. Now you're changing your tune. Okay, that's signaling to me that you're not a very honest person. There's not a lot of integrity here. You're saying one thing and then saying another. I don't think this is going to work out, right? It's a red flag. So that's the problem. So how can you answer the question? How can you pass this question without shooting yourself in the foot later on? Okay. A lot of people are tempted to just give a very low number so that they don't get eliminated because they ask for too much. But two things can happen. Number one, what I just described. Okay. And number two, they can say, well, wait a minute, this job requires some skill. And so it's not appropriate to have like a person working for minimum wage doing it, because that either means that they're unqualified, or that, like they're only worth minimum wage, in which case, that's not the person we want. We want someone who can do this job, and that requires some skill. It's above minimum wage. It also suggests that, this person might be desperate just for money, just to get any money. And that doesn't make for a good employee either, right? So, this is the problem, right? So you can't just say a low number. There's a lot of issues with that. So that's not the best answer to this question. The other thing is that a lot of times they'll have a range, right? An upper limit and a lower limit. That's appropriate for this job. Now, if you say, I'll do it for this, that's not appropriate for what they're looking for, right? Abdul says, hi, Bill. I was invited to a preliminary interview, and at that point, the very first question they asked was, tell us about yourself and what are your salary expectations? I found it so absurd. Well, okay, I replied to them like, I wish to know the overall scope of the job in details, as the job description touches many areas of my field. Okay, well, right off the hop, Abdul, don't find it absurd. It might be absurd, you might be right, but unfortunately it's typical. It's the standard thing that they ask. Tell me about yourself is one of the most common job interview questions that are asked. It's stupid, but they still ask it almost all the time anyway. And what are your salary expectations is also one of the most common job interview questions that you're going to encounter. There are about 10 of these. There are about 10 common job interview questions that they're very cliched and they're very annoying and stupid. But unfortunately, they are very, very common. And, so what's a good thing for you to do is to learn how to answer all of those 10 questions, because you're going to be asked them. And most of them are trick questions. There's a difference between being qualified for a job and being able to pass a job interview. They're two different things. A lot of qualified people don't pass job interviews, and a lot of unqualified people pass job interviews with flying colors. They're two independent skills, right? That's one thing that people learn. That's one of the first lessons they learn when they get out in the job market and they're doing job search, is they learn this lesson first, right? They go into it thinking, I'm qualified, therefore you should give me the job, and unfortunately it doesn't work like that. The number one reason is that, first of all, every single person they're talking to, every candidate they're interviewing is qualified for the job. So if that's traditionally, there'd be the average number of candidates they were interviewing in person would be 6. Okay. So the problem is when you're talking to 6 people who are all qualified, simply being qualified doesn't guarantee you the job. They have to go beyond that, right? Because all their options are qualified, right? It's like going to that Band-Aid aisle, like the example I started earlier, to buy Band-Aids, and there's like 10 options in front of you, and saying, well, these Band-Aids are approved to be sold in this country. They've passed inspection and they're approved to be sold. It's like, yeah, great. That doesn't mean that you're automatically going to buy them. There are many different types of Band-Aids, right? You have to pick one. So that's how these things work. Okay, so the salary question. Let's return to that. We talked about how you answer it on a web form or an application form where you have to put a number. Okay, some people just put like 0. That's not a good thing, because what happens is that, first of all, that's not giving them a real answer. And you can bet that they didn't ask the question to get it bypassed. They asked it to be answered legitimately. Secondly, they also have lower limits. So they'll have like an upper limit and a lower limit on what eliminates you. So if you put 0, that's below the lower limit, and that eliminates you because it's not a serious answer. Okay, so now you're in the job interview. They ask you, what are your salary expectations, right? Okay, so we set it up a little bit. Okay, so here's how you answer. Okay, you basically want to avoid giving a number, because the moment you give a number, you're screwed. Okay, it's stupid, but that's how this works. If you give a number, Now the number is either too high or too low. There's like a sort of hurdle number that you don't know what they're willing to pay and what their expectations are. And so if you land above that number, they regard you as too expensive. You're asking for too much, right? And that eliminates you. If you land below that number, okay, you're not too expensive in their eyes, which is good. But then the problem is that it's hard for you to negotiate something a little bit higher later on, okay? So you're screwed when you give a number. And the other thing is they're judging you at this point purely on price. They don't know who you are. They don't know if you're really even qualified or they'd want to work with you. They haven't seen how awesome you are yet. They're simply judging you on a number. And if their number is too high, they're not going to look at you. They're just going to eliminate you, and that's it. You didn't even have a chance to show them how awesome you are and how great you're going to be in this role. So the strategy is to not give a number, especially when this question is asked early on, okay? You want them to take a look at you to see what you have to offer before they make a decision. That's the whole point. So the first time they ask you, what are your salary expectations? You say, well, listen, it's too early to say. I mean, I hardly know anything about this job. I know the job description that you gave, but I don't even know what the benefit package is, or, what the vacation situation is, or what the work conditions are, or, is this shift work? Is this weekends? Does it involve holidays, mandatory overtime? What am I required to do? It's too soon to say. I can't really I'd be just pulling a number out of the air. So I can't say at this point. Possibly if we investigate, if you reveal more about the job, then I might be able to tell you. Okay. Now that was me sort of blurting this out, not with no rehearsal whatsoever. So you would obviously phrase it a little more elegantly, but that's basically your first answer. Now, sometimes that'll work. They'll say, okay, no problem, and they'll move on to another question. A lot of times that won't work, okay? And it's worth a shot, but a lot of times it won't work. They'll say, well, okay, we understand that, but we need to know a number. We need to know your salary expectations, okay? So if it goes to that sort of second round, then you move on to part two of your answer. And part two is... Part one was to just say it's too soon. I can't tell you. I can't say at this point. Part two is to throw the question back and say, well, listen, this position was posted publicly. So it's an approved position, right? So therefore, the salary range must have been approved also. Can you tell me what it is? And then if they do tell you, oh, well, it's gonna pay somewhere between here and here, then you say, that works fine for me. I don't see any problem with that. Right? So you basically throw the question back at them. Well, this is an approved position. Therefore, the compensation must have been approved. The salary range must have been approved. Can I ask what it is? And then whatever they say, you say, works for me. Okay, so that's part two. Part two. Not this, right? Depending where you are in the world, both of those have some bad connotations. Anyway, that's what I've learned. Okay, let's go over to questions very briefly. Tong says, what is the best thing to say if they tell you the salary in the initial screening? If they say the salary is 30,000, etc., is the best response to just say sounds good, even if you think it's low? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, okay, so what are your alternatives? Your alternatives are to say, no, that's not good, right? Like in some way, shape, or form. Now, is that what you want to communicate, right? You see, the other thing that's going on with this question, okay, something that's a little more advanced beyond like the absolute beginner stage, is that, you see, the reason that they ask this question is to eliminate you based on price. They don't know who you are, right? They haven't really talked to you yet. Especially if this is asked at the very beginning of your like first job interview, right? A lot of jobs, they have more than one interview, right? If you're going for a professional level job, it's usually more than one interview. You have like a screening interview, you then have a more in-depth interview, you might even have a third interview with different people involved, and then it goes to the offer stage, right? That's quite common, right? So if in your first interview, towards the beginning, they say, what are your salary expectations, right? It's not asked because they're trying to accommodate you, it's asked because they're trying to eliminate you, right? Okay, so what you want is you want them to feel good about you, right? You want them to think, oh, this person's a contender, right? That way, they'll get to the stage where they actually try and learn about you, who you are, what can you bring, right? That's what we want. Because the thing is, when people see, a lot of your great qualities, a lot of what you can bring, then they're more amenable to paying you. They're like, oh, well, we're getting a good candidate. We're getting someone that's going to really kick ass in this job and they're going to stay for a long time. If they need a little bit further up in the range, that's fine. But they're not going to give that at the beginning when they don't know who the hell you are, right? They're judging you on, how much money do you want, right? But they don't know who you are. You see, like, this is what's going on. This is why it's a little more abstract, okay? So that's why we don't want to give a number right off the bat, okay? We want them to be interested in us and to feel good about us long enough for them to get to know us and see what we can bring. That's where we can sell them on why we're the best candidate and they should pick us and not pick somebody else, right? That's the whole point. Okay? Zaid says, what if they refuse to say? Yeah, okay, here we go. So, okay, coming back to the answer. The first, this is how you answer. They say, what are your salary expectations? The first thing you say is, it's too soon. I can't really say at this point, right? Sometimes that works. A lot of times it doesn't. They push you further. No, I'm sorry. We need to know what your salary expectations are. Second thing you do is you throw the question back. This position is approved. Therefore, the salary range has been approved. Can I ask what it is? If they tell you, you say, sure, that works for me. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. What they do is they say, yes, I am a recruiter and I am recruiting for this job. I'm trying to find people that will fill this role, but I don't know what it pays. Like, have you ever heard that one? Yeah, sure, I'll believe you. You're recruiting for a job that you don't know what it pays? Sure, yeah, absolutely. So they'll give you all kinds of kiss-off, transparent horse shit like that, if I can use that word in a business it's a legitimate business word. Hey, so it's just this dance that goes on, right? Okay, so they say, well, we don't know what it pays, but we need you to tell us what you need, right? So you're like, okay, sure, I'll play along. So then you go to stage 3, right? That's where things get serious. You get to the third part of your answer, and hold on, we're just going to take Zaid, that continued, and they said, for example, the number will be mentioned in the contract. First of all, if any recruiter tells you that, that means that it's not a particularly good job, and it's not a particularly good company either, if they're endorsing that kind of thing. Thank you to Sagar. That's awesome. Yes, you're absolutely welcome, Sagar. And yes, this is episode 131 of this. Joshua says, great recommendation, Bill. I have an interview soon and the salary is not disclosed. Thanks for your in-depth insight in this gray area. I thought you said gay area, gray area. There we go. It's a little bit, has a different meaning, a one letter. Just one letter. I mean, I got it right except for one letter. Okay, so coming back to the whole stage 3 thing. Okay, if they say, well, we're not going to tell you what this pays, but we need you to give a number. Okay, that's when you move on to the third and final part of this. Okay, and the third and final part is to give a range, a wide range. Okay, anywhere from a low number to a high number. Okay, now these two numbers, they're still within reason, but just. Okay? They're the limit of what would be reasonable, okay? Or imaginable. So they say, you say, can I ask what the salary range is? And they say, yeah, you can ask, but we don't know what it is, or we don't disclose that. It's like, okay, but we need you to tell us your salary expectations. You say like, look, okay, listen, at this point, all I can do, without knowing anything about the compensation package, the working conditions, the vacation situation, or anything like that, listen, all I can tell you is that somewhere between this, here and here, somewhere in there would probably be fine, right? Now, the idea is that you're giving a wide range. It's not ridiculous. The numbers are not ridiculous, but they're a stretch, okay? So you're starting from a low number and you're going to a higher number, right? So you're saying, I don't know, anywhere between, 60,000 to 85,000, somewhere in there would be fine. That's all I can tell you at this early stage. I would need to know much more about the job to pin it down, right? And if they are unsatisfied with that, let me tell you, first of all, they're being unreasonable if they're pushing you even further to give a number, okay? But regardless of that doesn't matter. The thing is, if they push you again, that's all you do. You repeat that. Look, all I can say is somewhere between 60 and 85. I mean, that's all I can say right now. We'd have to discuss details. Okay? So that's your story and you're sticking to it. Now, here's the deal. Here's what that gets you. First of all, they can't eliminate you because you asked for too much, because your range started pretty low. You're not asking necessarily for a really high salary. It starts pretty low, right? But it also allows you to be able to negotiate a higher number later on, because you never committed to some low number, right? You said between 60 and 85. Let's say their cutoff was 65, okay? So they can't eliminate you because of what you said, because your range started at 60, right? But so you get over this hurdle. Then they take a better look at you because you're still a contender. They see your value. They see what you can bring. They start to like you, right? They think, wow, this person would be great for it, right? So later on, when you get to the offer stage, if you get that far, and they give you an offer, and they give you an offer for 65 or something, you could say, well, I'd need 80, to be honest with you. It's you're not going back on your word. That's what I said from the outset, somewhere between 60 and 85. I'm not changing my tune at all, right? Only the difference is that at that point, they're more likely to want to pay you 80 because they've seen how awesome you are. That's the idea. Okay. Joshua says, great recommendation, Bill. I have an interview soon and the salary is not disclosed. Thanks for your in-depth insight. Yes. Okay. The other thing is that candidate behavior is for them to want to know everything about the job, right? They want it all laid out, including the compensation. The employer behavior is the opposite. I've been on both sides of the table. The employer behavior is the opposite. You don't want to disclose a salary right off the bat. First of all, a lot of times, you're not going to believe this in the case of large organizations, but for most organizations are small, by the way, they don't know precisely what the range should be. They have the only hard stops they have on the lower end and the upper end are the compensation of the people below and above that person. So if you're hiring a supervisor, right? Okay. And the supervisor is supervising tradespeople or something. Okay. And the supervisor reports to a manager, right? What is the salary range for the supervisor? Well, everyone's got an opinion on that. It varies. But the only real hard stop is you don't want to pay the supervisor less than the tradespeople that they're supervising, right? And you don't want to pay the supervisor more than the manager who's supervising them, right? So those are the only real hard stops. But within that, what should the range be? It's a total judgment call. A lot of managers don't know what's appropriate. They might have an idea, but their idea is based on when they got the job 15 years ago. Things have changed since then. The labor market has changed. Economic conditions have changed. Competitive landscape has changed, this kind of thing. So they really don't know. So you don't want to just put down a number and commit to it because you don't know if that number is really that reasonable. You want some flexibility, and you want everyone to think it pays like really well so you get the best people, right? So that's what's going on there. Get in the chat. We've got 15 people here. This is a Q&A session. So that's why I do these. It's an opportunity for people to ask questions and get answers to them. I don't really respond to the comments like by typing in answers on the videos, just because I can't. I get too many comments. I can't just type out long answers. So get in the chat if you're watching this on whatever device, everything but a TV, I think. You should be able to see the chat box if you are a subscriber and get in there and ask me whatever you want. Anything to do with job search, anything to do with careers, that kind of thing. That's what these are for. And if you want to go deeper with me about any of this stuff and learn how to get a job and, all this kind of stuff, get a really good position, discover where they are, and then get it, check out that course, my Get Hired course. There's a link in the description. All I'm doing now is I'm just feeding off your questions. So that's why I'm here. So I'm just filling dead air until I get more questions. So thank you to everybody who's been asking stuff so far. But yeah, people fear this question. They fear it because they don't understand it. People have a fear of like asking for what, they want. Right? They also fear that by asking for something, they're going to attract a lot of ire and, it's inappropriate to ask for something. Those are a lot of the fears I believe that, young people have over this type of question, and this kind of thing. The thing is, like I said earlier, this question means different things based on when it's asked, right? If it's the first thing they ask you before they even know really who you are, they're asking to eliminate you. How much money do you want? Oh, you want more than what we were hoping for? Okay, eliminated, right? From the recruiter's perspective, hiring is an elimination process. You post a job and you get hundreds of people that apply, and you whittle that number down to eventually one person who you offer it to, right? So if 600 people apply, 599 go away with a no. You know what I mean? Of the 600 people, maybe 10 people get like a screening interview, something like that, maybe a phone interview, whatever it is. And then of that, maybe 5 or 6 get like actual job interviews, right? Maybe there's 2 rounds of job interview. So there's a first interview and there's a second interview. First interview, 5 people. Second interview, 3 people. And then they make a decision, right? One person gets the offer, right? That's the idea. So it's a process of elimination, right? And they're looking for reasons to eliminate you. Now, those 10 people that they gave a screening interview to, okay, they're all on paper, they're all qualified for the job. Your resume and your application, that get you the interview, right? But your interview gets you the job, right? Now, if all the candidates are qualified, you can't just go down there and say, well, I'm qualified, so give me the job, right? That's not really an argument because every candidate you're up against is qualified, right? So job interviews are about soft skills, right? They're about like who you are as a person. Are you the type of person they would want to work with? Right? If you go down to the interview with an attitude, or you go down to the interview and you've got a really rotten temper, or you're just disgruntled, they'll eliminate you outright just because of that. Like they don't want to work with that person. I don't care how qualified that person is. The person at the interview at some point is going to be the hiring manager. And the hiring manager, that's the person that if you get hired, the hiring manager is now your boss, right? You report to them. That's who the hiring manager is. The recruiter, you'll never see again. They're just there to deal with this whole selection thing. But then once someone is hired, they leave. You never see them again, right? But the hiring manager is someone that you have to work with. So if the hiring manager kind of doesn't like you because, you're like difficult, or, you have some kind of personal issue or something like that, that takes precedence. That's going to eliminate you. It doesn't matter how qualified you are. That's a deal breaker, right? Even if the hiring manager sees that you're more qualified than any of the other candidates they're speaking to, they still won't hire you because they're like, well, I don't care if you do a 10% better job than any other candidate. You're going to make my life a misery, So no deal, it's not worth it. Right? So job interviews are all about soft skills. Get in the chat. This is supposed to be a Q&A. There are 23 people here. Thank you for joining me. Let me know what your questions are. Anything about job search, anything about interviews or applications or employment. What goes on the other end? What's happening on the other side of the table? That's kind of my background. Not as a recruiter, but as a hiring manager. And if you don't know what the differences between those two are, the recruiter has a background in HR. That means that they know things like labor laws and employment standards. They know hiring practices. They know about onboarding. They know about background checks, that kind of thing. They know about, human rights laws and things like this, all the laws that they have to conform to. Hiring managers generally don't know that stuff, or they don't know most of it, because that's not who they are. They're not people that studied that stuff. If you're getting a job as an accountant, the hiring manager themselves is an accountant. They're the chief accountant, right? That you then report to as an accountant, right? So the hiring manager is someone who's an accountant. They know accounting really well, but they don't understand labor laws. The recruiter is the opposite. They know labor laws, but they know nothing about accounting. They're hiring an accountant, but they know nothing about accounting, right? So that's why you generally have both of these people involved in the process. They contribute different things, right? But the hiring manager is like the head honcho. They're the one in charge. They're the one in charge of the process. They're the one that decides that they even need to hire someone. That's up to them. They've decided, I need to hire someone. And they essentially pay for the services of the recruiter to assist them when there's a recruiter involved. So I've been the hiring manager many times. I've worked with recruiters, and I've also done it without recruiters. And it's kind of like pros and cons. Get in the chat. Let me know what questions you guys have. I'm here to answer questions. If you want to go deeper with me about all this stuff and learn how to get a job, check out that course. Link in the description box below under this live stream. That's where I put all my advice on how to get a job from beginning to end. How to get the posted jobs that are posted publicly. How to get hidden jobs, the ones that are not posted publicly. How to discover them, how to put yourself forward for them, how to get them. If you are interested in any of that stuff, check out that course. Okay, KZMax13 says, a controversial question. Why are employers so picky compared to, for example, hiring a handyman? The length of a commitment or what? Are you not picky when you hire a handyman? I would argue you need to be, because a handyman can screw up your home. How many horror stories have there been of like, oh, I got this person to like remodel my place and they messed it all up. They destroyed my house and then they took off with the money, right? I mean, how many cases of that have there been? There have been a lot, or, if something matters, it's worth like doing properly, taking the trouble to do it properly, right? Now you look at job search, okay? You look at employment. When they hire for like entry-level jobs, worker-level jobs, stuff at the bottom, and then they hire for professional jobs, and they hire for management jobs, and they hire for executive management jobs, and so on. It's sort of increasing importance to the company, right? If you get the wrong person that's like sweeping the floor, that can be bad. They can mess up the floors. They can piss everyone off. They can steal a few things on the way out, right? not good, but it's not as bad as, say, getting the wrong person to be a vice president. The vice president, they embezzle millions upon millions of dollars. They destroy the reputation of the company. They alienate all their major institutional customers and things, like doing not just immediate damage, but like now company has to spend millions and millions to work hard to rehabilitate their name and convince everyone, no, we're still a good company, right? They can drive away all kinds of key talent. They can run the business operation to the ground. Like, if you get the wrong candidate in that role, it's really bad. You know what I mean? So if you look at the hiring process and how much scrutiny goes into it and how much effort goes into it, it sort of goes up exponentially, right? So the more important something is, the more, due diligence you want to do and the more you want to be confident that you're picking the right person, right? The problem is with stuff at the bottom, like worker level type stuff, is that they think of it in terms of efficiency. Everything that recruiters do, for example, is governed by efficiency. It's like, how much time do we put into a candidate to make a decision? If we put in 1 hour, is that like a good use of our time? They think like this. This is how they measure the performance of the recruitment and selection function. It's stupid because they don't take a look at, whether these employees stayed and did a good job. They don't look at that. Because if someone leaves, why was that? Was it because the recruiter picked the wrong person? Or was it because the hiring manager, who became their boss, was horrible and drove them away? You can't tell at that point, so you can't pin it on the recruiter if the candidate didn't stay. Right? So, generally speaking, the rule is that they're picky about people that matter, right? They're less picky about people at the bottom. And what we usually see is they just take their best shot. They make a lot of assumptions about you based on stereotypes. They hire based on that. And then if you work out, great. If you don't work out, oh well, we cry over it and then we just hire someone else and get on with our lives. So that's the attitude that they have, right? It's silly, but you can understand it from a certain point of view, from an efficiency point of view. But do you build great companies like that? No. But that's what we see. That's the worker level, right? And this is the world of posted jobs. And just so you know, I feel like I always say this and it always falls on deaf ears, but posted jobs are not the main way people get jobs, just so you know. Going through recruiters is not the main way people get jobs. The main way people get jobs is networking, some version of networking. That means people talking to people, right? And the main place that people get hired is the hidden job market. So if you don't know what those are, don't take my word for anything. Go out and do your own research. Learn about these things. They will be to your advantage. Even for worker level jobs, You want to get hired at a construction site, like doing manual labor or whatever, You don't apply with an application. You go down to the site and you hang out and you talk to the supervisor, the site supervisor, or whatever, and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to work. You need an extra hand, I'm right here, minimum wage. And they'll be like, okay, hey, we could use another person. You're right here. Sure, I'll pick you. That job wasn't posted. There weren't interviews, like the traditional interviews. There's no recruiter involved, right? That person got hired, right? That's the example of a hidden job. It's a very mundane example, but that's an example of a hidden job. And that's also an example of networking, right? You got the job because you were right there. You spoke to the person. You said, hey, I'm here. You looking for any casual labor today? That kind of thing, right? Very mundane example, but an example nonetheless. That's the hidden job market and networking at the lowest level. It looks like that, right? Give me some questions. I'm here to answer questions. I'm just waiting for questions to roll in. I'm here just sort of filling dead air. If I get no questions, I have to sign off. Thank you to the people who participated so far, to Abdul, to Tong, to Sagar. I'm sure I'm saying your names wrong. I apologize for that. Zaid, Joshua, and my close personal friend KZ Max 13. We go way back to the good old days. Yes. So hopefully you got the answer to what are your salary expectations. The way I would recommend that you answer that. There's other questions that are related to it, like when they ask you, what is your current salary, right? It's not the same question. They're not saying, what salary do you need? They say, what is your current salary? Or what are you making now? Or what did you make in your last job, right? That's another awkward question. People don't like that question. I'll say what I always say with this, and that is that, just so you understand, what you did with another third party is none of their business, right? So you can voluntarily disclose it if you wish, but you are under no obligation to tell them, It's like somebody saying, what is your credit card number? Right? You're under no obligation to tell them that. That's, if you wanted to, you could voluntarily disclose that if you wish, but if you don't want to disclose that, you don't have to, The best answer to that is like, I'm sorry, I that's something I don't disclose compensation, just as a personal policy. There are privacy issues, there are, confidentiality issues. I'm sure you understand, And that's how you answer that. And what do you do if they ask you a question twice? They say, well, that's not good enough. We need to know what your current salary is, right? What's the blanket way to respond to that? A lot of people think like, they're telling me that my answer was not good enough and that I have to do better, so I got to come back with another answer. No, you don't. If you just said, sorry, I don't disclose that, and they say, well, I understand that, but we need to know, what is your current salary? The answer is, well, like I just explained, because there are confidentiality issues and privacy issues, I have a personal policy of not disclosing that, so unfortunately, I can't say. And you say it with a smile on your face, so you don't increase the awkwardness. You say it like, I'm sorry, I just, as I already mentioned, I unfortunately don't disclose that, How do you say that? Mitas says, how can I approach this as an intern at a tech interview as a fresher? Okay, now when you say this, what are you talking about? What are you trying to approach as an intern at a tech interview as a fresher? Are you talking about the salary question? If that is what you're asking about, it took me like 10 minutes to explain it. So go back to the beginning of the live stream and just listen to what I said. If that's what you're asking about, because I'm not going to just explain everything all over again starting now. Let me know what specifically you're asking about, and I'll be happy to answer. But yeah, like that's something that that's a technique that interviewers use a lot because it works. Where they ask you a question and you give an answer, but they don't like that answer, so what they do is they ask you again. And what a lot of people, especially younger people or people that haven't done this very much, what they'll do is they'll come back with a different answer, So maybe the first answer is they say, no, I refuse to say that. And then they're asked again and they go, oh, okay, well, here's the answer. Right? That's why recruiters do this, because it's effective. Now, here's what you do. If you give an answer and they say like, yeah, but then they ask you the same question again, right? Here's what you do. You give the same answer again. You don't have to use the exact same verbatim words, but you give the same answer again with a smile on your face. You say like, oh, well, like I just mentioned, I can't disclose that, unfortunately, because you see there's confidentiality issues and there's privacy issues, and those are very real, so I'm sure you understand. And then you shut the hell up and wait for the next question. And usually that's when the interviewer just moves on to the next question, right? You win, they didn't get anything other than what you wanted to disclose, right? but you didn't like totally ruin the mood. You did it very professionally, and you got that smile on your face. You say like, so there you go, right? So you're showing how professional you are. Also, remember, job interviews are all about soft skills, and everyone loves soft skills. Matthias. Yeah. So, salary expectations. Well, since nobody else is asking a question, I'll just recap it very briefly here. It's a 3-stage answer. Stage 1, they say, what are your salary expectations? You say, well, I'm sorry, it's too soon to say, right? I can't really give you a good answer on that right now because, there's a lot of things I don't know about this job, including, now, you don't need to go into this much detail, but just between you and me, and the entire internet, you don't even know like the compensation package. You don't know what the benefits are. You don't know what the vacation is. You don't know if you get sick days or not. You don't know if there's opportunities for advancement. You don't know if you're going to be doing shift work. You're going to be working weekends. Are you required to work holidays? Do you have to do overtime? Is it mandatory overtime? Right? What about remote work? Is the job like, can you do remote work as part of this, or is it all like on site? The list goes on and on. It's endless. Now, you don't know any of that. And they say, how much money do you need? It's like, it's stupid, right? So your answer is like, oh, I'm sorry. It's at this point, it's too soon to say. I can't really give you an accurate answer on that. We would have to see. Now, sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't. So you move on to stage 2. They ask you again, what are your salary expectations? You say, this is an approved position. It was posted publicly, right? So it must be approved. So you guys must have approved the salary range, right? So can I ask what it is? You throw the question back at them. What is the salary range for this position, right? And then whatever they say, you say, that works for me. Works fine for me, right? So you pass the question. They can't eliminate you based on the fact that you asked for too much money, right? And sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. In which case you move on to stage 3. They say, yeah. We don't know the salary range for this job, but we need you to tell us what you need, right? Like this kind of ridiculous crap that they pull. You move on to stage 3. You say, okay, and you give a wide range. You say, well, look, okay, somewhere between this and this, right? Low number to high number. Now, these numbers are just within reason, okay? They're not ridiculous. They're reasonable, but just, right? So, I don't know, somewhere between 60 and 85, like whatever, right? Somewhere in there, that would work for me, right? They can't eliminate you because you asked for too much money, but yet it leaves you open to negotiate for more if you ever get to the offer stage, right? That's the idea. Okay, so that's in a nutshell, that's what I'd recommend. There's a lot of other details to it, but that's basically the approach. Beautiful Story 88 says, agree, I expect 10 million. Can you provide? Naturally, people would expect much as they desire. Whatever. Okay, I don't understand what you mean by that. If that's what you're honestly expecting, then you got problems. Otherwise, people just assume it's a total lie, and then they just eliminate you for that. So, yeah. Right? Anyway, there are 31 people here. Thank you for being here. If you do want to go deeper with me, all the advice that I have to help job seekers at every level except executive. I'm not comfortable giving out advice for executive stuff because it's stuff I do. Check out that course. It's all in that course right there if you want to go deeper with me. All my advice all in one place. Posted job market, hidden job market, how to do networking, and it's geared for introverts. So if you're an introvert like me, you'll like this approach as opposed to more extroverted type approaches, doing things like networking and stuff like that. I basically share the way that I built up a consulting business, for my business consulting side, which that's what I do. I'm a management consultant. So I built that by doing the networking thing. And I'm an introvert. So, you can do it too. If you're an introvert like me, you can do it too. That's the thing about social skills. They're really not that hard. It's just that a lot of introverts, they shy away from it because they either don't have respect for them. They don't have respect for social skills. They feel it's a waste of time to develop my social skills. That's the first thing they think. So therefore, they're not good at them. They don't focus on them because they don't respect them. The second thing is that if you get to the point in your life, if you're an introvert, where you realize, like, wait a minute, those extroverts seem to be getting a lot of advantages that I'm not getting, right? Why is that? It's because of social skills. And what you learn is that social skills, if you actually focus on it and try to legitimately learn them, they're really not that hard. A lot of introverts, at least a lot of introverts that I know, they've done things like engineering and accounting and science and stuff, like very, very, you got to be very bright to do that stuff, So if you can do that, you can certainly do this, That's the great thing about it. Anyway, get in the chat. I'm just here sort of filling dead air. Ask me some questions. We're here to talk about anything to do with job search, interviews. Have you ever wondered anything about an interview? Why do they do certain things? What's going on the other side of the table, right? If you've ever dared to dream, ask that. If you're confused about anything, if you're wondering anything, let me know. I'm here to help you out. Usually I get much better flow of questions to go off. I have the opposite problem where I can't answer them fast enough. But thank you to the people that are here and that are participating. You guys are awesome. Job search can be, it's a very stressful time, a very stressful time in everybody's lives. It feels like it's never going to end. It doesn't feel temporary, but it is temporary. It's going to work out. It doesn't feel like that when you're in it. I remember that feeling from years ago. That's what it's like. And it's especially hard when you don't understand like how job search works. A lot of people think, I used to think, like when I was very young in my 20s or whatever, I used to think like, yeah, I'm qualified, so give me the job, and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So if you are confused about anything, you're not making sense of what's happening, let me know what the issue is, and we can dive into it. Wow. Okay, there are 35 people here. I'm going to give it another couple of minutes, and if I don't get any questions, I'm going to have to sign off, unfortunately. Get in the chat. There is a chat box nearby if you're watching this on anything other than a TV, and get in there. If you have to be a subscriber to my channel for like, I think the other requirement is you have to be a subscriber for like at least a week or a couple of days or something like that. I had problems in the past where people would post like derogatory things or whatever, and they would just subscribe, post something, and then leave, and it's like, all kinds of expletives and stuff, like just, so I had to change it to like, you got to be a subscriber for like a week or something. KZ Max 13 says, thanks. You're welcome. Me again. Yeah, I know who you are. I told you, we go back a long way. How should I play out a scenario where my previous employment has already been terminated and now I'm hurting for a job, i.e. addressing the topic, what happened? Are you employed? Okay, here's the deal. Well, that should ideally be addressed by your resume. They should be able to look at your resume and see if you are currently employed or not, right? So hopefully that's kind of explained directly or indirectly on your resume. So if your previous employer or your most recent employment, there's like an end date, then that suggests that you are out of work, right? Okay. So there shouldn't be really a question of like what happened. Are you employed? Now, a standard job interview question is to ask, why did you leave your last job? Okay, that's a standard job interview question. Okay, and you guys are asking some good ones today. Yeah, that's a standard question. Now, I've done videos on this. Everyone's done videos on this. Just like the salary question kind of has three parts, the why did you leave your last job question also has three parts, because it depends why you left. On one hand, you could have been laid off, right? You were let go without cause. Like, it was nothing that you did. It's just that the company was downsizing, or they were going bankrupt, or whatever, right? So it's not your fault. It's just that the company ended or did something. Okay, so that's sort of scenario one. Scenario two is if you left voluntarily, right? They didn't let you go, you just left, right? For whatever reason. And then the third scenario is if you were fired. Like, so you were let go by them for cause, right? So you answer that question differently, obviously, depending if you're in any one of those three scenarios, right? So if you were laid off, there's no harm in saying you were laid off. It's actually a good answer. If you were laid off with other people at the same time, like they laid off your entire department on the same day or something, I would say that, because that gives even further evidence that there's nothing wrong with you. You're a good employee. It was just they were downsizing. They didn't have the money to pay everyone or whatever. Okay, so there's no harm in saying that. Okay, that's a good scenario to be in. Scenario two, if you left voluntarily, maybe you didn't like the job, or you had major problems with the people there, or something that was going on there, or it just, it wasn't the right place for you to be in. You wanted to go, you wanted your life to take a different path, right? So that's kind of, it's still kind of okay, but you need to give a bit of an explanation, because if you don't give an explanation, you just say, I left, right? The problem is that they don't know you. They're forming their picture of you based on what you're saying to them now, right? And they can form the opinion that, oh, you're the type of person that just leaves things. If some little thing is not to your liking, you just leave, right? And that's not the kind of person we want to employ, because this is a job. It's not, a vacation. It's a job. Sometimes there'll be things that you might not like about it, but we're not wanting to hire someone that's going to just up and leave the moment like some tiny little thing is not to their liking. We want someone who's going to stay, right? Okay. So, you could say like, I left, because of this. Okay. There's, if you tell a bit of a story, you say like, well, I'll get to that in a moment, but it's okay to say that you left. It's not the end of the world. It helps if you just provide a bit of background detail. Okay. Now the third scenario, that's the tricky one. If you were fired or you were let go for cause, that's where it's a problem, because recruiters are taught a principle, and the principle they're taught is that past behavior predicts future behavior. So if you behaved a certain way in the past, then they can expect that you will behave that way again if they put you in the same situation, right? That's what behavioral questions are based on. When they say, tell me about a time you did this, right? They don't care about what you did at some other job. They're only asking the question to see, what would you do if they hired you and put you in that situation, right? Your past behavior they feel is the best predictor of your future behavior. So the problem is that if you got fired in the past, by the same logic, that suggests you're the type of person that gets fired, that doesn't work out, right? So that's why it's very dangerous to say like, oh, I was fired. Now, if you ask a recruiter how to answer this question, they'll selfishly advise you to play right into the recruiter's hand. They'll say, well, the best thing to do is for you to just be honest. Just be honest. Just tell them you were fired, then explain that, this is what you're working on and why it'll never happen again or something, right? Yeah. The problem is, in the real world, that usually doesn't work, because like I said earlier in the stream, the recruiter's job, it's basically a process of elimination. They start with like hundreds of people that applied, and they whittle it down to one person that they offer it to, right? So they're looking for reasons to eliminate people at every stage. That's the whole point. So if you sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I was fired from my last job," yeah, I didn't work out, right? What kind of impression is that making? That's telling them, "Oh, you're the type of person that gets fired." So what they end up doing is they end up eliminating you based on the fact that you were fired from your last job, right? So that's why this question is a bit of a trap, right? So here's what I would recommend, okay? And I'm going to say one disclaimer. The disclaimer I'm going to say is that, remember, always keep in mind, something you did with a third party is none of their business, okay? It isn't. They are not entitled to this information. You can disclose it voluntarily if you wish, but you are under no obligation to provide them with any information that you did with somebody else. It has nothing to do with them, right? They can ask anything they want. They can ask, like, what is your credit card number? They can ask whatever they want, but you are under no obligation to answer it if it doesn't affect, it doesn't have any dealings with them. So in this case, what I would say is I would not say that you were fired. If you were fired, and that's a concern, I would not say that you were fired. Okay? It's not that you're lying about it. You're not voluntarily disclosing that. You're not advancing that information. Okay? Instead, what I would do is I would talk about the thing that led to your firing without saying you were fired. I would say, like, well, this isn't kind of, the problem was I took the job and it was, this was the agreement. It was meant to be for this. And then over time, that job morphed into something that it wasn't part of the original agreement. It didn't speak to my strengths and it didn't speak to my interest, So I decided to move on. I'm ready to do more. That's the best phrase to answer that question. What happened with your last job? Why did you leave? Well, I'm ready to do more. And then you talk about what you're ready to do, which is coincidentally the things that they're wanting in this job. Right? So that's how I would recommend people answer these questions. They're not looking to really get to know you. They're just making their decisions based on stereotypes and assumptions. And unfortunately, if that's how you're being judged, you need to adapt to that, Okay. Some people go to job interviews and they bare their souls and they say, like, oh, well, it's like, I'm a really good employee, except that, sometimes I get a bit frustrated when I don't see the value in things. When things are very inefficiently done, it frustrates me because I want to do my job efficiently. And, when I'm told I have to do it in a very inefficient way, that really annoys me. And I always try to push to do something more effectively, more efficiently, so that I feel like I've accomplished something, And they go, okay, so you're a troublemaker. You're the type of person that doesn't simply do what they're told. You get frustrated and then you push back. Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll be in touch, right? You see how this is taken sometimes in job interviews? Right? Anyway, so hopefully in there you got your answer. What I'd recommend in a nutshell for the question, why did you leave your last job? Which is a standard job interview question. Hello to helicopter. Heavens to helicopters. Jumping mozzarella, Batman. Yeah, get in the chat. Let me know if you guys have any questions. There's 33 people here. Thank you for joining me today. It begins. Says, this is true. Not just as interviewer, but also employee. Don't make anything more efficient if it's not your job. Well, that's just what you might encounter at a bad company. But listen, the reality is that no one's job is ever 100% efficient. It's just not achievable. Some of the best companies in the world, some of the best efficiency experts in the world, experts on lean and all this kind of stuff, they'll agree. It's just not possible. You can approach the ideal, but you can never get there. And that's irrelevant because most people are so far away from the ideal. It's not even funny. The reality is that, you have to accept a certain amount of inefficiency or ineffectiveness in any role, because you are not simply doing something that's optimized for you. You're doing something that's optimized for the collective, right? The organization, That's just the reality. And, that's been my experience. That's just the reality of it. A lot of workers, you see your little piece of it. You see your piece of the machine, right? Your one little cog. And you're absolutely right. It's not very efficient a lot of the times. It could be improved. Sometimes it's justifiable. Sometimes it's not justifiable. People have done a terrible job in building the machine and in maintaining it and in improving it. They've done an absolutely terrible job or non-existent job in improving it, It begins, says, "Hi, Tom. Are you talking to me? If you are, I don't know if you are, but my name's not Tom if you're talking to me. I just did a panel interview and they said moving with candidacy. Ask for transcripts, references, and talking to PI, like private investigator. Is that what that is? And I think you're trying to say faculties. Is this still an interview or talking about projects? Sorry, having a problem understanding you. What's the context here? It's a PhD research position. Okay. It begins. Just became a member. Okay, well, thank you very much. It begins. I appreciate that. Okay, well, I'll certainly try and answer your question. Let's see here. It's a PhD research position. So you've applied for a PhD research position, is what you're telling me. Now, you did a panel interview for it. Okay, and they said moving with candidacy. I assume that means they said that they're moving forward with your candidacy. That means that you're still in the running and they're considering you. That's what I'm assuming you mean. So correct me if that's incorrect. They asked for transcripts, references, and we're talking to PI and facilities or faculties. Is it still an interview or talking about projects? So it's a PhD research position. After a panel interview, they said they are moving forward with candidacy. Well, if that's what they literally said, that tends to mean, like that one phrase, literally as you said it, that means that they are you're still in the running, right? Listen, it begins. Listen, here's the deal, okay? Here's the deal. All job seekers, they are impatient. They want to know, like, when am I going to hear back? What's going on? Have you decided? Have you reached a decision and what the decision is? Okay. Now, they want to know this immediately and they get very impatient and frustrated if they don't hear. Okay. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to understand. The professors. Okay. Well, if you're trying to say, maybe I'm just ignorant, but faculties is not a word. Faculties without the L in it is a word, if that's what you're trying to say. Okay, so yeah, it's not secured. Oh, it's not secured. Okay. Anyway, that phrase means that you're still being considered. That's what that means, right? Now, a lot of times they don't have an instant snap decision. You see, they're making a decision between people. It's not like a go or no go thing. It's all relative. It's like, we need this filled. Which one should we get? Now, sometimes you can be the best of like some bad options, right? You're not amazing, but the alternatives are worse. The other candidates were worse than you, right? Other times, all candidates are amazing. They're all like a 10 out of 10, right? That makes it very hard to decide, And that's why it's very frustrating because you go down there, you feel you did amazing. And they said you did amazing. They said, wow, you're really awesome. and you got a great feeling from it, and then you get a rejection letter later that says like, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't get it. It's because you did do very well and they were very happy with you, but everyone else did really well too, right? So like, that's the problem. Sometimes it goes like that, right? And other times they don't actually know if they're going to pick you because they haven't yet interviewed the other people, right? So if you were the first one they interviewed and you did really well, they might have said things, or you might have gotten a feeling that all showed that this was going to work. He was very optimistic. But then once they interviewed other people, they were all equally good. So now it's not quite as certain, right? So it's not always malevolent when they give you the wrong impression. Is what I'm saying. All these scenarios do happen, right? Okay. Exactly. They said 2 of the panel said I'm the best pick right now. Okay, well, that's good. Like, listen, you never really know, and a lot of times they never really know until the very end, okay? And then they have to argue about it. If there's more than one decision maker, they argue about it. And just from my involvement with academia, I'm very much from the private sector. I'm not from academia or universities. I did go back for about 5 years to do some teaching in universities in business school because I was asked to, but I'm not an academic, and it really left a bad taste in my mouth dealing with academia. One thing that they do in general, like just a general thing they do, is they collectivize a lot of their decisions. They distribute decisions. So no one person can be blamed for making a bad call because they weren't the only one that made the decision. They involved like 5 or 6 other people in the decision. So you can't blame them if they hired the wrong person because all these people were involved, right? And that's intentional. They water it down. It's like a decision by committee, right? The other thing is they play a lot of political games, right? So there's a lot of politics that goes into a lot of these decisions. There's always politics that goes into decisions. That's what I observed when I went back to academia for just a little bit. So it's not based on merit. It's not based on obvious things. It's based on a lot of politics, right? And sometimes if you have 2 people that kind of don't get along, but they're both involved in a decision, sometimes like one person will say, oh, which candidate do you want? And I say, oh, I want candidate A. And this person says, oh, you want candidate A? Okay, well, I want candidate B, like just because you're opposed to them, I've seen that kind of thing go on too. So there's actually I'm sure nobody cares about this, but there's actually a theory in organizational theory that describes this. It's called the garbage collection, or the garbage can way of decision making, which is like all the bad stuff just rises to the top, and it's almost a completely random decision in the end. It's not based on anything real. So there's no way to predict this. So I'm sure that's not the answer you're looking for, but I wish you all the best. IT Begin. There's no way to predict these things. It's a numbers game, just like all job interviewing is. No 2 organizations or even no 2 individuals hire the same way and have that algorithm, the exact same algorithm to assess people. It's always different. So some people look at you and they go, wow, that person's amazing. Other people look at you and they go, they're a non-starter, And that's how job search campaigns go for people. You give more or less the same interview in every job that interviews you. The difference is that one person hears your answers and they go, no. And then another person hears you give practically the same answers and they go, yes, you're hired, So we can minimize the damage we can do, and we can try to get good answers to things and be well rehearsed and have good social skills. But even with all of that, there's still a huge element of random chance. So it's a numbers game. So you succeed by doing many opportunities, right? Because each one is like a roll of the dice. It's just random. Yeah. So listen, it begins. Here's the deal. I hope you get it. You certainly a great chance of getting it based on what you said. I hope it works out. If it does come back where you didn't get it, just remember, It's not a reflection on you. It's because of random chance. And knowing a bit about academia, it's usually about political elements, right? Over which you have no control whatsoever. Okay, so just always remember that. Don't let the outcome of this one like data point influence your behavior going forward, or how you go about job search or doing interviews or anything like that. Hopefully that makes sense. Yes, one of the interviewer was suspicious the whole way, but on 3 panel of 7 people, 6 liked me. Okay. And thank you for the compliment. And thank you for becoming a member. That's great. Jace is here, says, I recently went through a full interview process where the recruiter initially quoted one salary range, but the final offer came in much lower than expected. I chose to walk away. Okay. That's not really a question. That's just a statement. Here's what I would say to that. My response. Listen, like, obviously you can do what you want. Who am I to say what you did was not the right thing for you? Okay. But in a general sense, if someone said, what would you do in that situation? Here's what I would say. I would say, listen, first of all, the fact that the offer came in lower, like on the low end, that's not something personal that's directed at you. That's actually a very standard, very common thing that they do. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you for as little money as possible. It's exactly the same principle when you go to the store and, you go to your favorite store, it's nearby to buy groceries or whatever, and, you need to buy a can of baked beans or whatever, and, you look at the price, right? And you see it's like $2. And instead of just buying it, instead you decide to go across the street to another grocery store and you check out their prices, and, oh, they're selling it for $1.80, so like 20 cents less, right? So, it's not that you don't like that store that you always go to. It's just that, you want to try and get it for less. You might even say to the store manager, if you're extroverted and you want to talk to the manager, you say, hey, I see you guys carry this product here. Across the street, they're selling it right now for $1.80, for 20 cents less. I like you guys. I like to come here. But I'm tempted to go across the street and buy it for $1.80. Can you give this to me for $1.80? Right? Now, sometimes the manager will say, okay, yeah, sure. We value your patronage. Come stay here shopping with us. Right? Here you go. We'll give it to you for $1.80. We'll give you a pass on that this time. Right? Sometimes things like that work. Right? So you try. Now, if it doesn't work, they say, no, sorry, it costs $2 if you want to buy it here. You say, okay, and you grumble a bit and then you buy it anyway, right? With the rest of your groceries. But you made the attempt, right? That's what they're doing here. They're saying, yeah, I know you said, we were going to pay you this, but when the offer comes in, we're going to try for this just to see if you'll just sign it and return it, right? Because some people do, right? But if they gave you the offer, that means you now, for the first time in this entire process, you now have a little bit of negotiating power, right? Because it takes effort and time to draft an offer letter for someone, to vet them and approve them and discuss it and all that, and then send it out to them, right? They don't do that with everyone. They do that with you. So they're not willing to just throw all that away and start with someone else if it's just a tiny little thing you're wanting, right? So it's worth it in this case to turn around and say, well, actually, here's what you would do. Literally, here's what you would say. You would say, wow, this is great. Thank you for giving me this offer. I'm very excited to work with you guys. And I think this is going to be fantastic and you won't regret it. Now let's go through this offer. Okay, this is good. This is good. This is good. Oh, you're giving me this. Okay, that's great. Okay, you're giving me that. Oh, that's worse than what I'm used to. But you know what? For you guys, I'll do it because I'm excited to have this work out, right? This is good. That's okay. That's okay. This, I'm used to a little bit more vacation days, a little bit used to more sick days or better conditions. But you know what? For you guys, not a problem. I'll take it because I'm excited to work here. Okay. This is good. This is good. Oh, and the number here, okay, that's a little bit too low for me. As we discussed, I'm going to need this. So I need you to change that number to this. And if you can do that, when I get that back, I can start right away, whenever you need. Right? So that's what I would do. Okay. Now, sometimes they will agree to all of that. They'll say like, yeah, we've decided on you. You need a little bit more money. We did talk about it earlier. Fair enough. Right? Other times they'll say, no, our offer stands, it only pays this. And you say, well, like we discussed, I need more than that. I told you that in the first interview or whatever, so it doesn't work out. Right. And in fact, what I would do is I just, if they say no, I just wouldn't respond to them. So they don't know if you're refusing it or you're just thinking about it. I would just let them stew in that confusion. And, you know what I mean? That's how I would handle it. Because when you walk away, you get nothing. If you do this, at least there's a chance that you could get something that works for you. So why throw that chance away if all it takes is like half an hour of your time and maybe one email, you know what I mean? Or one phone call, whatever you prefer. That's what I'd recommend. Thank you, it begins. I just saw the comment. Your videos have been awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm glad they're useful. Do you think negotiating salary in this current environment is a good thing? In academia is bad out there. Okay, well, here's the deal. What are some principles of negotiation? Principles of negotiation, there's many, and I've done live streams where we talked about negotiation, how it works. But you see, the thing is, there's always going to be risk in negotiation, right? If you try to negotiate, there's always risk. They say no. They say absolutely not. In fact, the fact that you even tried to negotiate with us after we had set it in stone, that signals to us that you're not. Oh my God. That's so annoying. Someone said audio. Did you guys? Oh, yeah. Okay, no sound. You see, that's the thing. I didn't touch anything and it just cut out. So, okay, I have to get a new mic cable. It's just as simple as that. This is obviously not cutting it. What was the last thing you guys heard, if I can ask? How long did it cut out? Or hitting the table. Okay, I'm going to hit the table as hard as I can. Okay. Yeah, like it. Okay. So it's obviously intermittent. See, I used to be like a technician type, like way back in the day. And those were always the worst problems, when something was intermittent, you know. See, the solution for something intermittent, if you can, is to stress test it, right? Push it far beyond its capabilities, see what part fails. That's the weak spot. That's what you replace. That was the strategy for intermittent stuff, right? So anyway, it begins as you were about to answer my question. Okay. Do you think negotiating? Okay, how far did I get? Anyway, I said what I was saying was, 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's do this. Negotiation. What are the basic rules of negotiation? Number one, there's always risk in negotiation, right? So the only time you would negotiate is if you have other options, right? Because if this doesn't work out, you have an alternative, right? You have something in the bag, but you're going for this, which could be better. Let's see how much we can get, right? That kind of idea, right? So, if somebody makes, there are people who don't understand this, who are unemployed, who need money, and lo and behold, they get a job offer. And, they get an employer saying, congratulations, we want to hire you. We're going to pay you this, right? You guys saw my hand gestures from before, right? And the employee turns around, the candidate turns around and says, no, that's not good enough. How dare you insult me with that low offer? I want this, right? And they say, oh, okay, well, no, and we're not going to pay you that. And in fact, we're actually withdrawing our offer. We're going to rescind our offer because you've now signaled to us that you're not satisfied with this. You feel it's beneath you. And we're not interested in hiring someone who's going to feel like this job is paying them less than they're worth, and they're still looking around for something better, and it's only a matter of time before they jump ship, and they're going to be disgruntled while they're here and their heart's not into it. So that's not really the person we're wanting to work with. So we are rescinding the entire offer, right? There's always a chance that can happen. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen, right? The other element of it is that if you bluff, you should be prepared that any bluff you make is going to be called, right? So, Stone says this isn't live. I've seen it before. It's live. Hello, I'm responding to you, Stones. I can see you, right? Sit up straight. Anyway. So, that was weird. Okay, anyway, you can prepare for any bluff you make to be called. It's just that simple. So don't just bluff if you have no alternative, right? You see, what is ideal is if you have another job offer in your hand, right? And then these people give you a job offer, right? This other job that you've just received an offer for, they're paying you this, right? So this job offer, you say, I'm going to need this, right? Now, if they say no, and they rescind the whole thing and it all falls apart, that's fine, because you still have the one that pays this, right? So you have an alternative, right? Now, what all this points to is that if you don't have an alternative, if you just have this one thing or nothing, and you're not expecting any second option to come around in the near future, it's usually prudent to not negotiate if you need the job. You know what I'm saying? Right? Get the job, just get it, right? And then you can still look for another job while you're doing that job. Your job search can continue. It's just that you're doing it from a position of being employed rather than being unemployed. That's usually a better situation to be in. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Mental note, get a new damn mic cable. That's like the third or fourth time that's happened. It's not a fluke. That's a recurring thing. So that's it. That's the last straw. I'm going to get something that works. Thank you to the people that like Joshua and It Begins and Serious Cat and other people, because that really helps me recover from that. Jace, do recruiters expect you to negotiate? I don't care what recruiters want. Recruiters are usually out to lunch about most things. You need to do what's right for you, whether or not that jives with what a recruiter expects from you. You know what I'm saying? You know, and the answer is yes and no. Like all these things, some of them do, some of them don't. How do you know? You don't, right? So kind of hard to act on that. Just do what's in your best interest. Okay. Any other questions before we sign off? I'm actually back in like about 20 minutes anyway. I've got another live stream on this channel called Honest HR Nitrous. If you want to go deeper with me for this stuff, check out that course. That's where I put all my advice all in one place, where I talk about this stuff and more. Link in the description box below this live stream. Also, if you're wanting to go a step further, you're wanting to improve your social skills, your soft skills in general, especially if you are ambitious and you want to move up into management or anything like that, check out that course right there. Okay? That's also linked in the description box below. It's called Write Like a Professional. I always regret picking that title because it's not the most descriptive. It is about writing, but it's about what to say. It's about how to respond to things. Basically, what I did is between going from being a supervisor to a CEO, that journey of many, many years, I learned a lot about communication skills and soft skills. And what I did is I put all of that knowledge into that course. So that's what that is. So if you want to, if you're interested in that kind of thing, check that out. That can help open doors for you in your career. And it's not a central thing for like this stuff, like with job search, but I also have a course called the $100 MBA. That's $100, not $100,000, $100, because it teaches you everything that you would learn in a brick and mortar MBA at a university. How do I know this? Because I have an MBA myself, and you're not relying on me to teach you everything. What you're doing is you're getting a reading list, the same textbooks that you get in places like Harvard Business School. So like the courses they take, they're taught out of a book, just like courses in most other universities these days. And you can order these books off Amazon for very cheap. And like literally $5, $10 for like slightly older editions. And you can learn the same, you can read them yourself, you can get the same material, get the same knowledge out of it. And what I do is I provide the reading list, plus I provide a lot of videos that guide you through the whole thing. I give you my take on different things, and I give you sort of an overview of the different topics, and then you can read the material. You can skim it if that's what you want, or you can go really in depth if that's what you want. You can do it out of order. You can only do one area of business if you just care about marketing, but nothing else. Like it's very, very flexible, and there's no tests, projects, or assignments or evaluations. So it's completely flexible. It's mainly for people that want to learn the material, for its intrinsic value, right? It helps you be a better employee if you understand the company you're working for, what they care about and why and how it works. It's great for entrepreneur types because this gives you the secrets to like how to make something popular, right? You know what I'm saying? So the knowledge is out there. I'm packaging it and giving it to you. If that's something you're interested in, check out that link in the description box below under this live stream. Bulging Battery says, how far with a PhD in mathematics get you in the business world? Not very far, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong. Math is damn important, and it does explain a lot. For what it's worth, I've got a bachelor in electrical engineering, and that's like 2 courses away from a bachelor's in math, something like that. At least it was back in the day when I took it. Now that's a far cry from a PhD in math, but so it's definitely important, especially in areas like finance, right? In accounting, math is not really important because all they do is arithmetic. You use basically grade 9 math or something in accounting. Like You know what I mean? But in things like finance, that's where, like in financial engineering and all this kind of stuff, and this kind of like that's where you use more advanced math. Economics, definitely, it's all about like predictive models of statistical analysis and all this kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a place in the world of business, for it. But the thing is, what's much more important is the soft skills. The soft skills are like the be all end all. Now we're talking about business. I was just talking about my MBA course like a moment ago. I'm assuming that's maybe what prompted that question. You tack on that knowledge with something like a PhD in math, and you might be a fearsome force. If you need other things too, you need to be practical, right? I don't know how practical a lot of people who just do math are. I'm not sure. I'm sure it takes all kinds. And a little bit of real world experience too can really help. So, it's a good start, but you certainly have the brain power to do all the other things, like hands down, Let's see. KZ Max 13. I think you have a video about staying on a topic during the interview, not to go over the full biography. How can I stay on topic, avoiding the side stories? Yes, told by me, but they asked. Well, okay, so where I have directly addressed that before is in the context of behavioral interview questions, where, they ask you a question and the answer is to tell a story, right? So they say, tell me about a time you failed on the job trying to do a project that you hadn't done before, or something like that. That'll be like a behavioral question. Now, your answer to that is going to be a story. You tell a story from your past. Everybody's going to have their own unique answer because we all have unique experiences, right? So you're going to tell a story. Now, there's the thing that everybody talks about with regard to behavioral questions. They talk about formats, whether it's the STAR format or the CAR format, or there's new ones all the time. It's like a flavor of the month thing. But the formats are to keep you on topic. And the idea is that you want to rehearse, you want to practice telling your story. And if you stick to these formats, it helps you not ramble on forever. Right? So the STAR format, like situation, task, action, result. It was 5 years ago. I was working in this position. I was given the task of doing this. My boss told me to do this. This is what I did. I did this, and this. And then here's the result. This is what happened. We succeeded. We worked on time, or this is what I learned, or this is what I had to do. Right? And that's how it turned out. There you go. There's your story. And what that does is it helps you tell the story in like a minute. So you're not there for 10 minutes rambling on and going off on tangents and never coming back, right? So that's one thing within like standard job interview questions that will help you stay on topic, right? But, okay, Stones is just spamming with a bunch of crap here, so I don't know. This is what I don't like about turning off a lot of the filters. You get all kinds of silliness on here. Hello, Stones, I'm live. I see you, need that, if that even needs to be said. Okay, yes, I've talked about some of these things before. I'm responding to the questions I'm getting. So if people ask me the same questions twice, I have to give a pretty similar answer. Anyway. Okay. Yeah, so that's what I have to say. Other than that, staying on topic is not necessarily the highest priority. What is the highest priority is answering their questions and giving them a good feeling about you. So if they enjoy speaking with you, that's kind of the highest priority in a job interview. If they like you, especially the hiring manager, if they like you and they enjoy speaking with you, what does it matter if you go off on a tangent and never come back? Maybe they're steering you off topic. They interrupt and they ask a qualifying question and you end up going off and to answer that. Hey, that's fine if they're getting something out of it and they end up liking you. They find the conversation interesting and they realize that, you both have a lot in common and you think much of the same way. this is all a good thing. So there you go. Anyway. Okay, well, I have another live stream in about 15 minutes, so I'm going to sign off, and I'll be back in about 15 minutes with another live stream called Honest HR Nitrous. That's where we talk about the same thing, job search, but we talk about it more from a gritty reality point of view, where we talk about all the stupidity that occurs, like fake jobs and ghosting and stuff like that. So if you want to join me for that, come back and we'll get into it. And if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer your questions there. Thanks, everyone. You guys are awesome. I'll see you soon. Check out my courses, especially this one. If you're between jobs and you're experiencing some confusion as to what to do, what can I do to get hired? That's why I created this. It's been a great help to a lot of people. So check that out. Link in the description. Thanks very much. Take care. I'll see you soon.